One that's we're joined now by the UK High Commissioner to South Africa, Antony Phillipson. A very good evening to you, High Commissioner. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I recall you and I spoke immediately after the discovery of Omicron and the decision that you took as the UK, and I asked if there would be a turnaround. This is an about turn. Whether it's quick enough or not, what led to it? If you could just explain that to us and the rationale behind it.
Well, thank you very much indeed for having me back on. As you say, you and I spoke less than 3 weeks ago as we moved in the face of the identification of this new variant, which I think actually when you and I spoke last, it didn't even have a name. And we said then that we were moving quickly because of the concern that was shared by scientists all around the world, including here in South Africa, to understand exactly what we were dealing with. But we also said at the time, and the Prime Minister said to President Ramaphosa on Friday, 3 weeks ago, that we would lift these restrictions as soon as they were not necessary, and that is what we have done today. We moved quickly back then, just, as I say, less than 3 weeks ago, in order to slow the spread of Omicron into the UK. Now that Omicron is widespread within the UK, as our ministers have said in the House of Commons this afternoon, and indeed I think the debate may still be going on, we have concluded that it is not necessary to keep them in place, and we have lifted them, and that is what we have done today.
And let's talk about debate, because quickly is the operative word. Now, that is something that I raised, and you said it was because it was protective or defensive action, but now you're saying you're lifting this because you've realized there is community transmission and that the travel ban seems less effective. But at that time, I did raise local scientists and indeed people within the international scientific realm saying that travel bans were ineffective. So just talk to me about the correlation of this. You now saying there's community transmission, and because of that you realize the travel bans are ineffective.
I think what I said then, and we have always agreed with, is that travel bans will not keep a variant of this virus out of countries, but travel bans can slow the spread, and that is what we acted to do in order to understand, give ourselves, even if it was just 2 more weeks, to understand the threat and the risk posed by this variant. And there's real-time analysis being done on this, including a very important study, I think, out from South African scientists this morning. So we have continued to work with partners here to understand what it is that we're facing. We acted 2.5 weeks ago in order to slow the spread. Now that the spread has happened, we have concluded that there is no need for these travel bans, and that is what our ministers have said, and that is why we have lifted them today. I think we have acted within 2.5 weeks. That is pretty swift.
The fact that you also had what some would say equally swift reciprocal action from countries like Nigeria, the government there also imposing a travel ban on the UK, including Canada and other countries that had inflicted one upon them. Was that an incentive? Was it a nudge in the direction to say maybe reconsider?
I think UK ministers will take decisions based on UK public health priorities, but we also do understand, of course, that these cause impacts in the other direction, including for UK interests. It is not only the disruption to travel between the UK and South Africa, and we fully accept that there has been disruption for businesses, for families, for tourists, but it has been in both directions. So we didn't want to impose them, and we said at the time that we did, the Prime Minister said at the time that we did, that we would lift them as soon as we can, and that is what we have done today.
And you've no doubt also been watching, listening in on the conversation. You and other countries in the north who've done likewise have been accused of economic sabotage. Do you think that that's unfair comment, given the fact that even an Africa Guide commentator was saying the UK move, and I quote him, "I sincerely hope the government is not expecting any thanks for this. It single-handedly destroyed the Christmas New Year market for much of Africa, as well as butchering confidence in the UK travel industry." Your thoughts on this?
I think it's important to unpack a few thoughts here. The idea that we deliberately set out to cause economic damage to any particular country, I think is simply not the case. I do understand, and I said, I think when we talked a few weeks ago, that we understand that these travel restrictions have impact, including, as I say, on UK interests, including in the sectors that you've mentioned. We did not do it deliberately and casually. We did it in the face of the emergence of a new variant that was causing widespread concern to scientists around the world. We have now moved as quickly as we could in order to lift those restrictions, because there is no purpose in keeping these specific restrictions in place. I would, of course, highlight there are still measures that we are taking, other countries are taking, including pre-departure tests to fly to the UK, just as there are pre-departure tests to fly to South Africa. So, we are all dealing with this virus together. We are all still in the middle of this pandemic. We do know that we need global collaboration. We know that we need conversations between our scientists to understand what's going on. We know that we need conversations between our policymakers to understand what's going on. But at the time that we acted 2.5 weeks ago, we felt that we needed to just give ourselves the breathing time to understand the impact that we were facing from this new variant. We decided today that there was no longer any need for these specific restrictions on South Africa and the other 10 countries. The idea that we specifically targeted South Africa and those other 10 countries, I just don't think is true. The idea that we deliberately did it at Christmas, I just don't think is true. It happens to be the time that the threat rose up. We faced and we acted, and now we have acted in order to remove the restrictions.
So let's focus then now on internal sentiment, and we'll also zero in on the action that you're taking to manage the situation as best as you can. But one of your citizens, for instance, was saying that they view this whole thing as absolutely nothing to do with infection control, but rather more about bureaucratic platitude. What are your thoughts around this sentiment, including those who are already in quarantine, who's saying, now that you've established that there's community infection, people who have a negative test after 8 days should be actually let out of quarantine instead of having to stay the 10-day requirement. What are your thoughts about these sentiments?
So, if I may, this is a debate that is playing out literally as you and I are having this conversation, because the debate is still happening in the House of Commons. And just before I came on, I was looking to see the latest reports. And Sajid Javid, our Health Secretary, said earlier today, when he was asked about this, that he had asked for urgent advice. I think the very latest thing I've seen is that Stephen Barclay, one of our other ministers in the government, has said that he believes that if people have tested negative for coronavirus while they're in hotel quarantine, then they should be able to leave. But I think it will require a change in legislation that the government, I think, will move very quickly to effect once they have concluded what is the best thing to do. We set up a system of hotel quarantine. We did it for good and valid reasons. We reimposed it 2.5 weeks ago. It obviously needs to be unraveled now. And I fully appreciate the concern that is felt by people who find themselves in the middle of this as it plays out.
What do you mean you did it for good and bad reasons?
The UK system is moving as quickly as possible to understand how best to deal with the situation.
What do you mean you did it for good and bad reasons, or did I mishear that?
I didn't. Forgive me. I didn't say good and bad. I said good and valid reasons. We did it for the reasons that we said.
I was somewhat taken aback by that, so I wanted to make sure. So then let's look at, I believe that people will be charged £100 for the last-minute tests. Given the conversation around the expenses, is it something that people you think are going to embrace? How are you going to roll this out? And also the fact that now you've taken countries off the red list, does that mean that planes will be able to fly out to countries that will allow them in?
So I think, we are all dealing with this in real time, and this is a fast developing situation. We have moved now in order to say that anyone coming into the UK will need to comply with the same set of regulations. They will need to conduct a pre-departure test. It doesn't have to be a PCR, it can be a lateral flow test. Then when they are inside the UK, assuming they are eligible to enter, but of course there's not just now the restrictions for the red list, they will need to isolate until they have conducted a second test once they're inside the UK within 2 days. But I know, again, anecdotally, a lot of people are taking those tests at Heathrow Airport and they are getting their results later in the day. So that is what we are putting in place. We are making sure that the tests are available. We're making sure that those tests are appropriate. How this develops going forward, I think we will need to see as we all dealing with this virus still together. Omicron is a significant challenge to all of our countries. We are seeing it here in South Africa. We're seeing it in the UK. We're seeing it in other countries. And when you and I spoke 2.5 weeks ago, I think it was literally the day before that we'd even heard of this new variant. So this is all moving very fast. We are trying to keep pace, trying to make sure that we can apply public health measures in order to keep our citizens safe at the same time as not causing undue disruption. I do recognise there will be people who have experienced this in the last few weeks and will say, well, okay, I've experienced that disruption. And we didn't want to do it. And we said that at the time. We've now lifted these restrictions as soon as we felt able to do so.
As you say, a lot of the questions that I'm asking you have not been concluded in the House of Commons. The debate is still raging on. But people who are calling for reimbursements, is it something that is feasible?
So I think this is going to be a function of people talking to their booking agents, talking to those who they book the hotels with. I would also suggest they probably need to look at travel insurance. We will work through this with people, and we just have to sort of address the situation that's unfolding in front of us. I don't think we could have anticipated what we were going to go through 3 weeks ago. We felt the need to act at the time, and we are now dealing with the consequences, and we will keep working through that with people, with partners such as South Africa, to try and make sure that we can protect public health at the same time as making sure that we're able to keep the connections between our countries going forward.
Hi, Commissioner. As the saying goes, hindsight is 2020. From your own personal beliefs, the experience that you've had, the exposure, do you still think that travel bans are effective to keep a variant like Omicron or other future mutations of the disease out of a country, given the fact that it spreads so easily, so quickly, information is not always available about its origin?
I think as we have dealt with COVID over the previous, we're now 18, 19 months into it since February, March 2020. And as you say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. If you had asked me in February, March 2020, as I was sitting in New York, where would I be sitting in December 2021? Would I be sitting in South Africa talking about this topic? I don't think I would have guessed it. So hindsight is important. And I think as we look back on this pandemic, and the way that it's evolved is that it evolves quickly. It evolves in different directions at sudden pace. So I think we have all looked at versions of social distancing. I personally think that travel bans are a form of social distancing. They're a form of keeping people apart because we know that the virus is transmitted between people. Do we believe that travel bans will stop the virus ever circulating into a country? No. And I think we have never said that. Do we believe that travel bans, as maybe sort of the most global version of social distancing, can slow the spread? Yes, I think we do. And that is what many countries, not just the UK, many countries over the permutation of this virus over the last 19 months, we have all been in that situation where we have not wanted to do so, but we have applied external travel bans, applied internal travel bans. We don't want to do it. We only do it when we have to. That is what we did almost 3 weeks ago, and we said then that we would lift it as quickly as we could, and that is what we have done today.
So very briefly, is it fair to say then that you'll be grounded over this holiday season?
I was always planning to stay in South Africa over this holiday, and that is where I will be.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. Much appreciated. The UK High Commissioner to South Africa, Antony Phillipson, speaking to us about the UK's decision. It's a quick about turn, some would say, removing from its red list 11 countries, including South Africa and Nigeria. And you recall that we told you here on the Globe yesterday that the federal government of Nigeria had taken a decision to reciprocate and slap a travel ban on those countries that have put it on its red list. So where the debate in the House of Commons will end, we'll let you know later on.